Oh, hi. Welcome to Hiking with Anderson. I'm Dr. Owen Anderson, and I'm the research director at Clarity Fund. You caught me out here working on my Hamlet. I was using this stone to represent Yorick's skull. I was thinking about Hamlet as I was hiking today in the woods because of his concern about knowing. Hamlet's all about epistemology. It's about knowing what happened to his father, and he has a number of ways he approaches that in the book. I was going over some of them just now. Even this edition has on the cover Yorick. He considers him and the fact of his death and thinks about he'd known this guy. This was the jester who'd played with him when he was young and told him jokes. He says he was of infinite jest. And now he holds his skull, and he's gone. His flesh is turned to dust. And he reflects on Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, also turned to dust, and all they did. What comes of what we do in this life? Is there any purpose or meaning to it? So the problem of Hamlet, the problem of knowing what happened to his father, is nested in that larger problem about the meaning of life. He starts that way in Act 1, Scene 2, when he says, "The world seems to be an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely." So can we know what the purpose of life is if the world is like this? It strikes us that something's wrong with the world. This is the problem of evil, of course. Something's wrong with the world. And in his case, he's aware that his father seems to have been murdered by his uncle, who then married his mother. And he seems to know this by intuition at first. He's sort of putting pieces together, and he wants to know with more detail, with more specifically, is this true? Is this indeed what happened? And if that is the case, if things like that can happen in the world, what kind of world is this? It doesn't seem to be a very well-organized or well-ordered world if that's the kind of thing that goes on. So in the book, in the story, you can follow him trying a few different ways to come to know. He has that initial intuition he's putting together about how his father died. Then he also tries a kind of experiment, right? A scientific experiment. He has a hypothesis, and he has these players that come, these actors, and he puts on a play, and his hypothesis, the experiment is that if his uncle's guilty, he'll see this acting out of what he did to his own brother, and he'll have a guilty response. So he tries this kind of, we'll call it a scientific experiment, right? To see if his hypothesis is true. Even then, he's not satisfied in the end with that, because he still thinks there could be other ways to interpret his uncle's response. He even has an encounter with his own father. This might be a kind of religious experience or special revelation in the sense of the ghost of his father coming to him from beyond the grave, telling him what happened, telling him to remember him. And even that's not yet enough, because how does he know this is the ghost of his father, or perhaps that the ghost hadn't lied to him? So he has this problem with knowledge. In knowledge, we want to know if our beliefs are accurate, if they represent reality. It's through knowledge that we have access to reality. When we say we believe something, say I believe God is real, or God is eternal, I want to know if that represents reality or not. Is that indeed true? And there are doubts that someone might have. Just like Hamlet has doubts about what happened to his father, there are doubts that a person might have as they think about whether or not God is real. And one of the most common ones, of course, is that the world is not organized in a way that you would think it would be if God was real. If God is perfectly good and powerful and has all knowledge, the world wouldn't be like this. So that problem that Hamlet wrestles with, and in his famous soliloquy, he's wrestling with that problem of what to do about it, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. So to continue to live is to deal with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Why is fortune outrageous? Why is a world like this? And the alternative, the option he has, is killing himself. You would take arms against them, not by fighting against them in this life. That's not what he's saying. He's saying take arms against them by dying. And he considers that option, to die, to sleep no more, and by his sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. But there's a problem. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, and there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. So we stay alive and we struggle with meaning, we commit suicide and we don't know if that'll be a better case. It might end up that we're in a worse situation. So either way, we have this problem. If we exist, we are existing as rational beings, and rational beings want to have meaning. They want to understand. And the world presents itself to us with this problem of evil. In this case, it's for Hamlet, it's the death of his murder of his father. And he wants to know what happened. So he has intuition, but intuition doesn't give him knowledge. He tries that experiment, doesn't give him knowledge. He's told by a ghost, and he still has doubts. And that's the way that doubts work, right? There are other possibilities you haven't ruled out. Now, Hamlet, someone might say, well, Hamlet is a bit OCD. He has sufficient information to make a conclusion, and that may or may not be true. I'm not sure that's the purpose of Hamlet. The purpose of Hamlet is putting this on display, that something is rotten, and trying to figure out why this happened. It's not only the facts of the matter, but understanding why the world is like this. So you might say of Hamlet, well, he's encouraging too many doubts. He should make up his mind, stop being unsettled. But the problem is similar for us. We want knowledge in order to have access to reality. That's how we get access to reality, is by knowing. And especially we've been thinking in our series about knowing God and knowing the good. And so we have beliefs about those. And a belief, it takes the form of a subject and a predicate. So you say, like as I said before, God is real. And that's your belief. And you want to know, is that true or not? And there are options, alternatives, doubts that come up about that. And you want to know, is it the case or not? It's not enough to simply assert it. Some people do that and they say, you don't have any proof God isn't real. And so I'm going to begin with that as my knowledge claim. Start there. God is real, and go from there. I'll just simply assert the brute fact of knowledge. But that doesn't really help us. It doesn't help Hamlet in the situation he's working on. It doesn't help us to simply assert a brute fact of having knowledge, because what I'm worried about myself is, how do I know? And I might run through certain things like, well, I haven't encountered any real challenges. I'm settled in my own mind. Most of the people I know think this way. And in that way, we're doing what Hamlet did, right? He went through tradition or intuition. We could appeal to tradition. He went through a special revelation from a ghost. He went through a scientific experiment. And we still have doubts lingering. We haven't yet got to certainty. And someone might say, well, why does certainty matter? That's too high of a standard. But when we're asking questions and we want to get to reality, we want to have knowledge in this sense, certainty isn't too high of a standard. That's what we're aiming for. I want to know, is my belief accurate or not? The philosopher John Locke discussed 3 kinds of certainty, kind of levels of certainty, depending on what they're about. And the most fundamental level, the one that he even attributes knowing ourself and knowing God, that we can have certainty about because of the kind of proofs we can have about those 2 things, that I am real and that God is real. And he goes through those in Book 4, Chapter 10. But certainty there is not the same as psychological persuasion or confidence. Someone could be confident. They could say, I'm certain about something about which they can't show. But instead, what Locke is showing is that there are some things that are, the alternative is self-referentially absurd. You'd have to use the very tools you're denying in order to get there, or deny the tools you're using. You get involved in a self-contradiction, and so you do have certainty of the objective kind, not just a subjective kind, both about yourself and God. And it's interesting he says that. I think John Calvin says something similar, that our knowledge of God and our knowledge of self come together because God is eternal and we're temporal. So as we know about the eternal, we also know about the temporal. As we know about what is from eternity, what had no beginning, we know about what was created, the creator and the creation. So that's why we can say that some things are clear about God and man. Those 2 come together, and then about good and evil. So we want to have certainty. We want to know, am I correct about this? Is this accurate? Do I really have access to reality? Or is there something else that's true and I'm missing it? Can I have knowledge? And that's different than just asserting a brute fact of knowledge, or simply saying I know because I meet certain criterion. And we've been looking at that in our series, in our 2 seasons now. This is episode 8 of season 2, and we're wrapping up season 2. And we've been looking at ways in which we can indeed show that it's clear that God exists, that we can be certain that God exists. Certain it comes from the same root as being certified. So a belief is certified, is authentic, is genuine, it's real, as opposed to an illusion or a counterfeit. And so our belief about God is real, God is the creator. Our belief in theism, our affirmation of God the creator, is perfect in being and wisdom and power, holiness, justice, goodness, and truth, that we can indeed show each of those through steps. We can have that knowledge. As Hamlet's speaking with his father, and his father's telling him about what happened, and he ends just like we're ending season 2. We're out here in the woods today. We're ending season 2, and we've gone through questions about God's existence. And we can end the same way Hamlet's father ends, and he says, adieu, adieu, remember me. Welcome to the post-credit scene at the end of episode 8, season 2. I'm on my hike today, and it's pretty humid. I'm actually hoping it's going to have a monsoon storm, although nothing is shaped up yet. I'm hoping that because the weather forecast said it's probable. In fact, I even heard someone say they know it's going to rain. But of course, this is often mistaken because they don't actually know, they just think they know. And that's one of the themes at Clarity Fund. We want to have the knowledge of God, be able to know the glory of God as revealed in both creation and redemption, and be able to show that, be a faithful witness about that glory. So connecting up our knowledge by being able to show what we claim to know, not just thinking it or relying on probabilistic claims like the weather does. But I do hope a monsoon shapes up. It'll be nice to have some rain. Thanks for joining me for season 8. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and keep up to date on our webpage, as we'll be having announcements of new events and also publications. See you next season.